My brothers, my sisters, welcome back to the channel. Today we speak not just of Burkina Faso, but of Africa's awakening. If you believe in freedom, unity, and the power of our people, then make sure you subscribe, share this story, and let the world hear Africa's voice. Because what you are about to witness is not just history, that is destiny. They said the night was quiet in Ouagadougou that day, but in truth, nothing was ever quiet anymore. The streets breathed with a tension that even silence couldn't hide, a silence that trembled with suspicion, betrayal, and fear. At 3:14 a.m., a convoy without insignia crossed the city's dimly lit northern district. 3 armored trucks, 2 drones above, no radio chatter, only coded lights blinking in rhythm, red, white, red. In less than 8 minutes, they stopped outside a French-owned safe house, an unassuming building wrapped in stillness. Inside, a woman was typing her final report. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes, pale, calculating, flickered across the encrypted transmission lines one last time. She had known this moment would come. She'd been watched for weeks. Burkina Faso was no longer the fractured land foreign agents once moved through easily. Under Ibrahim Traoré, the country had become a maze of loyalty and secrecy. Every word was recorded, every step traced. Every lie eventually caught up with its maker. They broke in fast. No warning, no words. She didn't fight. She only turned, raised her hands, and whispered, almost relieved, "You're late." By dawn, the story had already begun to spread. A French operative captured inside Ouagadougou, caught transmitting encrypted data linked to military positions and gold routes. The Western press dismissed it as propaganda. France refused comment. But among the people, those who had seen too many years of hunger, too many hands stealing from their soil, it became something else. A sign, a whisper that maybe this time the tables had turned. Ibrahim Traoré didn't smile when they told him. He simply nodded, his gaze distant, his mind somewhere beyond the moment. He asked one question: was she alone? The answer came hesitantly. No, there had been others. But only she remained. By noon she was brought before him, in a dark room that smelled faintly of dust and rain. He stood across from her, silent, studying her like one studies a mirror that suddenly starts to speak. She looked nothing like the enemy. Tired eyes, small frame, a certain sadness beneath her stillness. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, not defiant, not broken, calm. "You think you've won," she said. "But you don't even know what you've been protecting." He didn't answer. But something in her tone stayed with him. When she leaned closer, the guard stiffened, yet he didn't move away. She whispered something in his ear, just a few words. The kind of words that don't make sense at first, until they start haunting you. He blinked, stunned, as if a ghost had brushed past him. Then she was taken away, and the room fell back into the familiar cold of state power. What she whispered that day changed not just him, but the destiny of Africa itself. Before that day, Ibrahim had already lived through years of betrayal. He had seen promises signed in gold, only to be written over in blood. The people called him a soldier of conscience. But conscience is a heavy weapon to carry in a world built on deceit. He'd come from the dry plains of Koudougou, a boy who grew up watching foreign trucks dig into the red earth, carrying away its riches. Every mine guarded by men who didn't speak his language. Every contract written in a tongue not meant for his people to understand. By the time he wore the uniform, he already knew Africa's wounds were not accidents. They were policies. When he took power, he made one vow: no more hidden masters. But the more he tried to cleanse his country of influence, the more invisible hands began to close in. Sanctions, media attacks, internal leaks, the French ambassador recalled. Aid frozen. Even his own officers began whispering of caution, that perhaps, to survive, he must bend. But Ibrahim Traoré had never been good at bending. He walked through hunger. He spoke to mothers who'd buried children under flags they didn't understand. He saw markets where rice cost more than a soldier's pay. He saw young men trading dreams for boats bound to nowhere. And he decided, enough. That was when the whispers began, of spies, of infiltration, of something deeper than economics. The word espionage had returned to Burkina Faso's vocabulary. And the French agent, the one they caught, wasn't the first, though she might be the last. Behind closed doors, the interrogation room remained silent. For 3 days she said nothing. The documents seized from her were beyond ordinary intelligence work. Coded messages between European energy officials, GPS coordinates of unregistered drilling sites, surveillance images of African meetings. Yet the data seemed incomplete, as if she had only part of something bigger. Then on the 4th day, she requested to see him again. He went. No entourage, no cameras. Just the two of them, the hum of a dying fan, the slow drip of rain outside. She asked him a question that startled him more than any accusation. "Do you believe in redemption, Captain?" He frowned. "For whom?" "For those who served the wrong master," she said, but learned too late. Her eyes, he noticed then, were not cold. They were tired, like someone who had seen too much truth to still believe in victory. He wanted to ask who she really worked for, but instead, she slid a folded note across the table. Coordinates, a place in the Sahel, abandoned decades ago. "You'll find the reason they still fight you," she said, "and the reason I stopped fighting for them." Before she was led away, she added softly, "Don't trust your inner circle. One of them reports to Paris. That night, Ibrahim didn't sleep. He opened the classified files again, reading them under the dim light of a single lamp. There were familiar names in the reports, old mining companies, defunct NGOs, former generals. He began to see a pattern, a shadow structure beneath the country's surface. Layers of control disguised as charity, as investment, as peacekeeping. And somewhere, a signature kept repeating. A code name linked to multiple coups across West Africa. It was the same mark that appeared on the file found in her encrypted drive. The next morning, he ordered all communications cut to non-allied embassies. He replaced his chief of security with a man he trusted since his cadet days. He summoned his intelligence officers, demanding they reopen old archives from the Sankara era, the ones marked foreign correspondence. Everywhere he looked, he saw threads connecting the present to a buried past. And through it all, the whisper replayed in his mind, the thing she'd said when they first met. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even information. It was something that struck deeper. A sentence that carried both guilt and warning. Your revolution was never yours alone. He didn't know what it meant, but it burned in him, reshaping every thought, every suspicion. Who had started the revolutions? Who had ended them? Who had funded them? By the 5th day, the intelligence teams decrypted the first half of her files. What they found wasn't a map, it was a list. A quiet record of payments, funding transfers and coded authorizations, linking multiple African regimes to the same foreign trust. Some of the names on that list were sitting in his own government. The realization hit like thunder. The betrayal wasn't just foreign, it was domestic, rooted in those who had pledged loyalty. In the markets, people still sold bread for coins that barely bought survival. In the villages, children studied by candlelight. But in the upper circles of power, millions moved like ghosts, funding the very chains that kept them all bound. He looked out over the capital that night, the flickering lights, the hum of generators, the distant echo of prayers, and he understood the weight of the moment. The woman in custody had not come to destroy him. She had come to test him, or perhaps to awaken him. Somewhere in the deep corridors of his memory, a line from Thomas Sankara returned to him. He who feeds you controls you. Now he knew it wasn't just food. It was truth. The next morning, he called for a convoy to the Sahel coordinates she had given him. Against all advice, he decided to go himself. "If there's a lie buried under our soil," he said, "I'll be the one to dig it up." And as the sun rose over Ouagadougou, burning gold against the horizon, the world outside had no idea that inside one man's silence, something was beginning to break. The illusion that power belonged to those who owned the maps. He rode out into the desert without knowing it yet. But the whisper of a captured spy had already set Africa on a new course. One carved not by bullets or speeches, but by the slow, dangerous unraveling of hidden truth. The journey into the Sahel began before dawn, beneath a horizon painted in smoke and dust. The convoy moved like a shadow across the barren plain, No insignias, no lights, no words. Traoré sat in the lead vehicle, his mind locked in a silence deeper than the desert around him. Every mile took him further from the capital, from the world of politics and cameras, and closer to something older, buried, and dangerous. The coordinates the spy had given led to a place that didn't exist on any official map. An abandoned mining facility from the 1970s, built by a French company long since dissolved. It was said the mine had collapsed, killing dozens of workers. The story was that it was sealed, cursed by dust and death. But files she left behind hinted that it had never truly closed. Something had been moved in and out of it for years, quietly, systematically, under the guise of humanitarian shipments. As they reached the first checkpoint, his soldiers hesitated. The ground was littered with rusted machinery, bones of metal that once dug into earth for gold, uranium, or whatever was worth selling. The air was heavy with the scent of sand and rust. Every step echoed with memories of exploitation. The past was still alive here, buried but restless. Inside, the tunnels stretched like veins through the red soil. They followed old power lines, flashlights slicing through the darkness. At the end of one corridor, they found what looked like an office, paper decayed into dust, typewriters frozen mid-word, French safety posters still clinging to the walls. But deeper in, beyond a sealed steel door, lay something else entirely. Rows of sealed containers, unmarked, untouched by time. Traoré ordered one opened. Inside was not gold, nor mineral, nor weapon. It was a stack of documents wrapped in plastic, classified colonial archives, ledgers of export routes, signed agreements, coordinates of military installations, financial records linking corporations to intelligence agencies. And in the margins, stamped in red, one recurring name, Operation Echo. The spy had left breadcrumbs for him, but not the full story. Operation Echo appeared in multiple documents as a covert colonial continuity plan, an operation designed to maintain influence across Francophone Africa even after independence. The plan ensured that each generation of African leadership remained bound to invisible contracts, agreements signed under economic pressure or orchestrated chaos. He closed the file and whispered, almost to himself, "We never left the mine." That night, back in camp, he couldn't sleep. The desert wind howled through the broken windows, and every sound felt like a warning. His second-in-command, a man named Issouf, approached quietly. "You think she told you the truth?" he asked. Traoré looked at him. "She told me enough, but why help us?" He didn't answer. Because deep down he didn't know. There were too many possibilities, regret, betrayal, or maybe something else. Perhaps she had seen something that broke her faith in her own cause. Or perhaps this was still a game, a long deception. But one thing was certain. What he had found was real. When they returned to the capital, the silence that greeted him was uneasy. Whispers followed him through corridors. The ministers asked for explanations. The Intelligence Council demanded the files. He refused. He kept them locked, guarded, unseen. Trust was now a luxury he could not afford. The following week, an encrypted transmission reached his office. No sender, no location. Only coordinates, different ones this time, and a single message. "You found the mine. Now find the mirror." The code style matched the spy's earlier data. It meant she was still alive. He ordered the coordinates traced. They pointed not to a desert, but to an unlisted safe house within Ouagadougou itself, abandoned since the 2014 uprising. He went alone at night, accompanied only by 2 trusted men. Inside, the air was stale. Broken furniture, shattered glass, a single light bulb swinging from a frayed cord. But on the far wall, there was a board pinned with photographs, images of him. His aides, his meetings, surveillance angles from inside his own office, and pinned at the center, a photo of the French spy herself, smiling faintly, eyes half-shadowed, with a handwritten note beneath. She wasn't alone. He stood there, frozen, staring at his own reflection in the cracked glass. The realization struck him hard. The network hadn't ended with her. She was just one piece in a machine built to outlive generations. Someone inside his government was feeding information out. Someone close. The next morning he convened a meeting of his Security Council. He watched each face carefully, noting who avoided his eyes, who looked restless, who looked afraid. They discussed routine matters, defense budgets, resource deals, but he could hear the tension beneath their words. The spy's whisper had poisoned his certainty, and now every loyalty looked suspicious. Later that night, he reviewed classified communications from the past 6 months. In one of them, he found something strange, a message encrypted using the same cipher as the spy's transmissions, but originating from within the presidential compound. It was signed with an alias, one he recognized. It belonged to General Cairo, his oldest ally, a man who had fought beside him when they seized power. The revelation crushed him. He remembered the nights they'd spent together during the coup, hiding from gunfire, sharing stale bread under candlelight. They had sworn brotherhood in the ashes of a collapsing regime, and now the same man was betraying him in silence, selling their sovereignty one secret at a time. The voiceover slows, heavy with resignation and resolve. There are betrayals you can forgive, and there are those that define you. Ibrahim Traoré knew which one this would be. In the days that followed, he began to move like a man living 2 lives, one in the light, one in the dark. Publicly, he appeared calm, defiant, still the revolutionary face of a proud nation. But privately, he orchestrated quiet surveillance, pulling strings, tracing messages, feeding false intelligence to see which ones resurfaced in foreign media. Each leak led back to Cairo. And yet, he didn't arrest him. Not yet. He wanted to know why. The spy's whisper echoed again. Your revolution was never yours alone. Was Cairo serving France? Or someone higher, someone unseen, operating through layers of debt, diplomacy, and deceit? The international pressure was mounting. Western outlets began to question Traoré's authoritarian tendencies. Aid was delayed. Rumors of a coup filled the air. The same headlines that once praised him as a reformer now painted him as a dictator. He understood the message behind the propaganda. Obey or be erased. In the midst of it all, another letter arrived, unsigned, delivered through a local courier. It bore the same handwriting as before. Inside was a short note and a single photograph. The note read, "You found the traitor, but do you know who made him one?" The photograph showed Cairo shaking hands with a Western envoy during a closed meeting 3 years before the coup, before Traoré even came to power. It wasn't betrayal born of greed. It was recruitment. The truth was bigger, older, and colder than he had imagined. That night, he finally visited the spy again. She was kept in a secure facility, isolated from the world. When he entered, she didn't look surprised. She only smiled faintly as though she'd been waiting for him. "You found it," she said softly. "Enough to make me wish I hadn't," he replied. Her voice was thin but certain. "Then you're ready to understand why I came." He leaned closer. "Tell me," she shook her head. "Not yet. First, you must see who truly rules your enemies." She gestured toward the small window, where distant lights blinked over the sleeping city. "You see those lights? Each one of them burns on a promise your people didn't make. The real war isn't fought with guns. It's fought with debts, secrets, and faith." He stared at her, unsure whether to trust or hate her, and then she said, "You're fighting ghosts that wear your friends' faces." The words settled like poison. He wanted to demand more, but she turned away, whispering, "Soon, you'll see the mirror for yourself." As he left the room, the voiceover softens to a mournful tone. Burkina Faso slept beneath the stars, but its leader walked in a waking dream. Each truth he found bled into another lie. The web grew thicker. The mirror drew closer. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the capital, Ibrahim Traoré knew the war had changed shape. It was no longer about land or gold. It was about minds, faith, and control. The woman he had captured was no longer just a prisoner. She was a key, and perhaps the last one left. And somewhere, hidden among his own ranks, the hand that had fed her information was still reaching for him. The rising sun brought no comfort, only the quiet certainty that the next move would decide not only his fate, but the fate of everything he stood for. The city woke uneasy. Rumors spread through Ouagadougou like dust in a dry wind, whispers of a purge, of secrets uncovered, of a silence tightening around the presidential walls. Markets opened late. Radios repeated official denials, but everyone could feel it. Something unseen was shifting beneath the surface. Something that smelled like fear. Inside the palace, Ibrahim Traoré stood at his window, watching the first light crawl over the rooftops. The spy's words still clung to him like smoke. "You're fighting ghosts that wear your friends' faces." It had been days since he'd visited her, and yet her voice echoed louder than his general's briefings. Each sentence she'd left behind had opened another door, and behind every door, he found more ghosts. He had ordered Cairo placed under discreet observation. Not arrested, not yet. Sometimes patience reveals more than confrontation. Every message Cairo sent, every call, every unexpected visitor, all were logged and traced. The pattern emerged slowly. Communications routed through an unlisted satellite link, bouncing through servers in Dakar, Geneva, and Marseille. Someone was orchestrating the network remotely, a ghost network, older than any government. By the end of the week, the intelligence team decrypted one of the transmissions. It was an audio file, short but damning. Cairo's voice, calm and certain. "He's no longer controllable. Prepare contingency." The words hit Ibrahim harder than a bullet. He knew what contingency meant. It meant elimination. For the first time, the revolutionary who had stared down nations felt the cold edge of mortality. He wasn't fighting ideology anymore. He was fighting machinery, a machine that could erase him, rewrite him, or replace him with another puppet. The voiceover slows. Steady, deliberate. When you rise against an empire, they don't always invade you. Sometimes they just plant doubt until you destroy yourself. He didn't want to believe it. But as the hours passed, signs of betrayal multiplied. Security protocols overridden. Military orders issued without his consent. Secret accounts surfacing with massive, unexplained transfers. He gathered his closest confidants in a small briefing room. Only 4 men remained he could still trust. They were soldiers, not politicians, men who'd fought with him, bled with him. Around the table lay scattered maps, intercepted messages, and photographs of suspected operatives. One of them, Captain Suleiman, spoke first. "Sir, this isn't just Cairo. There's funding from outside. A coordinated effort. Someone wants the transition to fail. They're planning a strike. How soon?" Within days, the room fell into silence. Only the hum of the old ceiling fan broke the air. Traoré looked at each of them. "Then we don't wait." From that moment, every action became part of a silent war. The next night, power went out across the capital, the first blackout in months. A message arrived through a secure channel, unsigned but familiar. "The mirror is breaking." The spy was still alive. And she knew what was coming. He ordered her moved to a safer location against the advice of his council. "She's still valuable," he said. But part of him knew it wasn't just strategy. There was something about her, a strange connection forged in the dark corners of truth. She had once been part of the machine he now fought, yet she was the only one who seemed to understand how to dismantle it. The blackout lasted 6 hours. When power returned, 2 military warehouses had been burned to the ground. Ammunition missing. 2 officers unaccounted for. Cairo had vanished. The next morning, state radio announced he was under investigation for corruption. But within the barracks, the real story spread, that Cairo had fled with help from external forces. France denied involvement, as always. But satellite data told a different story. A French aircraft had entered Burkina Faso airspace the same night, flying low, leaving without clearance. The air grew thick with the scent of treason. In the following days, panic took root. Fear seeped into the cracks of power. Ministers resigned quietly. Ambassadors disappeared. Even among the people, uncertainty replaced hope. The man they had trusted to protect them now stood against enemies they couldn't see. Enemies who wore familiar uniforms. But in the middle of it all, Ibrahim did something no one expected. He went silent. No speeches, no statements, just absence. He retreated to the northern base, the same desert route where the mine still slept under sand. He brought only a handful of loyalists and the encrypted files retrieved from Operation Echo. He wanted distance from the noise, from the whispers of coups and counter-coups. He needed clarity. And he knew the truth was buried somewhere between the spy's words and Cairo's betrayal. At night, by the dim light of a lantern, he replayed the intercepted messages again and again. Patterns emerged, timestamps, phrasing, and even the rhythm of certain words. He realized something. They weren't coded manually. They were generated, artificial. This wasn't just a network of traitors. It was a system, a digital ghost programmed to guide local assets, to feed disinformation, to adjust narratives automatically when leaders resisted. It wasn't one spy or one general. It was a living algorithm, built decades ago to sustain control over post-colonial Africa. The files hinted at it, but he hadn't believed until now. Operation Echo was never shut down. It evolved. It used agents like her. It used soldiers like Cairo. It adapted. He sat back overwhelmed. The war he fought wasn't even human anymore. But then he remembered her final words. You're fighting ghosts that wear your friends' faces. Ghosts. Not just men. Systems. Systems built on trust, obedience, and fear. He knew what he had to do. He ordered a team to re-establish contact with the spy. When they found her, she was weak, bruised, thinner, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. But she smiled when she saw him. You found the mirror, she said. He nodded. And now I need to shatter it, she looked at him carefully. Then you must show the world its reflection. What do you mean? You can't destroy a system built on lies by hiding the truth. You have to expose it, even if it burns you with it. He hesitated. They'll call it treason. They already do, she replied softly. The difference is now you'll make it mean something. The following week was chaos in slow motion. Secret meetings in empty buildings. Coded messages passed through trusted couriers. One by one, Ibrahim gathered evidence, proof of covert funding, media manipulation, resource theft, and psychological operations stretching across borders. The data came together like shards of broken glass, each reflecting a piece of the same hidden empire. He began preparing a public release, a broadcast that would reveal everything to the world. But as the day drew closer, the resistance tightened its grip. Drones began circling over the compound again. Anonymous threats arrived hourly. His communications were jammed. Then, on the night before the planned broadcast, the unthinkable happened. The spy disappeared. Her cell door was open. The guards found no struggle, no footprints, no trace. Only a single piece of paper left on her bed. 3 words written in French. Je t'ai libéré. I freed you. He read the words in silence. It could mean anything. Escape, sacrifice, betrayal, or maybe all 3. That same night, explosions rocked the outskirts of the capital. Rebel units, armed and funded by unseen sources, began advancing toward the city. The coup had begun. Traoré stood before the war map, eyes burning with exhaustion, mind sharper than ever. He realized the final game was here, the same game she had tried to warn him about. The mirror had cracked. Now the reflection was fighting back. He gathered his men and spoke quietly. If we fall tonight, he said, let them remember that we didn't kneel. They nodded, silent and solemn. Outside, the sky burned with distant fire. As the night deepened, so did the storm. Communications failed. Gunfire echoed in the dark. The traitors were moving faster than expected, their attack precise, almost surgical. It wasn't chaos. It was coordination. He understood then that Operation Echo was no longer an operation. It was alive, and the only way to kill it was to make the world see it bleed. He ordered the servers powered manually. If the system was online, they could still broadcast. Even 1 minute of truth might be enough. The voiceover tightens, like a held breath before a storm. He walked into the war room, lights flickering, air thick with dust, and began to record the message himself. No teleprompter, no script, just conviction. He spoke not as a soldier or a president, but as a man who had looked into the face of history and seen his reflection staring back, chained and bleeding. The last words of Act 3 linger like a heartbeat fading into static. If they call this treason, then let the world know treason has another name. freedom. And with that, he hit send. The transmission lit the dark like a spark in dry grass. The broadcast began at 5:47 a.m. local time. No warning, no announcement, just a flicker on the national network. Then the feed cut from the usual state insignia to a dimly lit room where Ibrahim Traoré stood, framed in the glow of a single lantern. His uniform was unbuttoned, his voice steady but stripped of ceremony. He spoke to the people and to the world. He revealed everything, the secret accounts, the invisible contracts, the digital echo that had infiltrated governments, rewritten news, funded coups, and assassinated hope. He named Operation Echo and its French, American, and regional architects. He released proof, documents, recordings, satellite trails, all streamed live. In the first 10 minutes, silence gripped the country. Then came the flood. Phones buzzed. Radios jammed. International media scrambled to verify. Western embassies denied involvement, then went dark. And inside the city, men in expensive suits and clean uniforms began to panic. By sunrise, the streets were awake. Crowds gathered in front of screens, cafes, and markets. People shouted his name. Some cried. Others prayed. For the first time, truth had stepped out of the shadows, raw, unfiltered, unafraid. But truth, like revolution, doesn't come without blood. Before the hour ended, the counterstrike began. The network activated its defense. Power grids shut down again, communications collapsed, and unidentified drones entered Burkina Faso airspace. The soldiers in the capital began receiving conflicting orders, some from him, others from imposter channels mimicking his voice. Confusion spread through the ranks like wildfire. Traoré stood in the command bunker, watching monitors flicker as systems fell offline one by one. Captain Suleiman rushed in. They're jamming everything. We've lost half the outposts. Fall back to manual, Ibrahim ordered. We fight on signal flares if we have to. Outside, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from artillery. The coup forces were advancing. Trucks mounted with machine guns tore through the outer defenses. The capital trembled under the sound of distant explosions. And through the chaos, Ibrahim's message continued to stream, bouncing from one pirate server to another, impossible to erase completely. He had set truth free. Now it was fighting for its own survival. Hours blurred into smoke and sweat. Bullets tore through the night. His loyalists fought block by block, alley by alley. Suleiman was hit near the radio tower but refused evacuation. Finish what we started, sir, he gasped, pressing a blood-soaked hand to Ibrahim's shoulder. In that moment, Ibrahim understood. This was no longer about politics or power. This was legacy, the kind written in sacrifice. He returned to the underground chamber where the servers hummed weakly on backup power. One remaining connection pulsed, faint, flickering. It was an incoming message from an encrypted node. He opened it, a video feed. The spy. Her face was lit by firelight, eyes tired but still sharp. I told you, Ibrahim, she said softly. Once you show the world the mirror, they'll try to shatter it, and you with it. Where are you? He demanded. In a place you can't reach. And that's how it should be. She smiled faintly. You've done it. The file is spreading faster than they can contain it. They'll call it propaganda, they'll bury it under headlines, but it's too late now. It's everywhere, he clenched his jaw. They're coming for us, I know. And they'll keep coming. But remember what I told you. Ghosts can't survive daylight. The feed cut. He sat there, surrounded by the humming machines, the sound of battle echoing above. His revolution had reached the point of no return. By midday, the outer perimeter fell. Helicopters circled the skies, dropping propaganda leaflets calling him a traitor, a dictator, a danger to peace. But on the ground, the people did not move against him. They formed human chains around the radio towers, chanting his name, demanding the world listen. That was the moment the empire realized something had changed. They could kill the man, but not the message. Inside the bunker, the heat rose, dust falling from the ceiling with every tremor. A soldier stumbled in, wounded, coughing blood. Sir, we can't hold them any longer. Orders? Ibrahim looked at the cracked screen still showing fragments of his broadcast. He whispered, We hold the truth. Then he stood, lifted his rifle, and walked toward the stairwell. Outside, the air shimmered with smoke. The streets were chaos, vehicles burning, civilians shouting, soldiers firing into the dark. But amid the madness, something extraordinary was happening. Ordinary citizens were defending soldiers loyal to him. Teenagers carried ammunition. Women formed barricades. Old men waved flags made from torn uniforms. It wasn't a battle for one man anymore. It was a battle for meaning. And then, through the haze, the enemy's armored convoy appeared. He could hear the engines growling, feel the vibration under his boots. He took cover behind a burnt-out truck and motioned to his men. "Wait till they're close." The first armored vehicle rolled into view, emblazoned with a foreign insignia. He froze. It wasn't Burkina Faso. It was French. The shock was momentary. Rage took its place, he signaled. The ambush erupted. Gunfire ripped through the street. Explosions swallowed the air. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose, every shot echoing the same unspoken vow: freedom or death. The battle raged for hours. Bodies fell, buildings collapsed. The world outside pretended not to see. By the time the smoke cleared, only a handful of his men remained. They dragged him back inside the bunker, bleeding from a shrapnel wound. He waved them off. "Leave me. Secure the data." "Sir, that's an order." They hesitated, saluted, and vanished into the dust. He sat alone, slumped against the wall, the hum of servers fading one by one. The last backup uploaded. Transmission complete. He smiled faintly through the pain. For all their satellites, their algorithms, their lies, they couldn't stop a single man from telling the truth. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, faint static filled the room. Then, through the broken speaker, came her voice again, whispering, "You did it." He opened his eyes weakly. "Where are you?" But there was no answer, just the sound of wind. Outside, the fighting faded into silence. Distant cheers, faint but real, rose through the smoke, and as dawn broke again, the whole world was watching, not the explosion, not the coup, but the message that had gone viral across millions of screens. The people of Burkina Faso have spoken. No more chains, no more shadows. Across Africa, others began to rise. Nigeria, Mali, Congo, Niger. Hashtags turned into rallies. The truth was now a movement, and though Ibrahim Traoré's fate that day remained uncertain, dead, captured, or hidden, one thing was undeniable. The ghost network had been exposed. The mirror was broken, and Africa was finally staring at its own reflection, proud, scarred, unafraid. The voiceover slows, like a fading drumbeat. Empires fall when men remember they were never slaves. Silence lingered over Ouagadougou like a wounded breath. The smoke had settled. The gunfire had ceased. But no one knew if Ibrahim Traoré was alive. For 2 days, the world waited. News agencies speculated. Some called it a coup, others called it a blackout. The French embassy released a cold statement. "We have no involvement in internal Burkina Faso matters." But on social media, millions of Africans had already seen the leaked footage, the files, the names, the recordings. There was no going back. Across the continent, something unseen began to move. Protests flared in cities that hadn't spoken up in decades. University students painted his name on campus walls. Mothers carried photos of their sons lost in silent wars and said, "He told the truth for all of them." African leaders remained cautious, watching in secret meetings, whispering to their aides, "What if this is the beginning?" The footage of the battle spread like wildfire. Unverified, shaky, raw. Soldiers shouting, civilians chanting, fragments of his last broadcast looping over the chaos. It wasn't polished propaganda. It was reality, and it was enough to shatter decades of silence. Then, on the third day, a single photo appeared online. Grainy, taken from a drone, a man in fatigues walking through scorched sand, limping, face wrapped in a scarf, carrying a torn Burkina Faso flag. The caption read, "He's still alive." It was never verified. But it didn't need to be. The image became a symbol, a reminder that even if they silenced him, the truth he had carried could not be buried. Weeks passed. Foreign banks froze Burkina Faso's accounts. Trade routes were sanctioned. The country went dark again. But this time its people didn't panic. They built markets with their hands, defended borders with volunteers, shared bread when there was none left to buy. And when asked why they endured, they answered simply, because he believed we could. Meanwhile, files from Operation Echo began surfacing across Africa, smuggled by whistleblowers, uploaded on pirate servers, mirrored endlessly. Each revelation was another wound to the empire, each leak a reminder. The age of control was ending. Months later, a journalist from Ghana released a report. She had followed the trail of the French spy, the woman who started it all. Her body had never been found. Only one clue remained, a coded letter hidden in the archives of the French intelligence division she once worked for. It contained a single phrase, handwritten in ink, "He will finish what we began." Analysts argued over what it meant, but the people understood. She had defected in silence, sacrificed herself to ignite a truth she could never speak aloud. Her whisper had become the match that lit a continent, and Ibrahim Traoré, whether alive or martyred, became something far larger than a man. He became an idea. His portrait hung beside Sankara's in homes and schools. His words, transcribed from his final broadcast, were painted on banners, sung in marches, printed in textbooks. The empire survives through silence. Break the silence, and you break the chain. The world powers attempted to rewrite the story. They released reports, hired journalists, funded think tanks to spin the narrative. Disinformation, they said. But it didn't matter. For the first time, Africa was writing its own version of history, not through permission, but through pain. Years later, children in Burkina Faso would ask their parents about the man in the old footage, the one who defied the world. And their parents would smile, not in sadness, but in pride, because they had lived through the moment when one soldier's defiance turned into a continent's awakening. They called him a rebel, a radical, a danger. But he was none of those things. He was a reminder that freedom is not given, it's remembered. As the sound of wind moves through the dry plains, the voice continues softly. The French spy came to destroy him. Instead, she freed him, and through him, an entire people remembered what it means to stand unshaken. The horizon glows faintly, not with fire, but with dawn. The closing line lingers like an echo across the continent. Perhaps she didn't betray France. Perhaps she betrayed silence, and in doing so, gave Africa back its voice. This was never just about a man. It was about a whisper that became a roar,